Committee meeting of the Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes Fire Authority. My name is David Hopkins and I am Vice Chairman of the Executive Committee. Although members of the public are able to attend and observe in person, the meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the authority's YouTube channel after the meeting. The first item of business is the election of chairman. I will now ask Graham Britton to ask for nominations for chairman for 2023-24.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Are there any nominations for the position of Chairman for 2023?
Councillor Will.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Simon Rouse.
I'd second that.
Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, Councillor Rouse is duly appointed as the Chair.
Get your name plate, Simon. Actually, that's what I want.
I left. Oh, it's just gone. It was just waiting.
Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome to this morning's meeting. We'll move to item number 2, which is appointment of Vice Chairman. Ask Graham Britton to ask for nomination.
Thank you, Chairman. Are there any nominations for the seconders? I'd like to second that. Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, Councillor Hopkins is duly appointed as Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Congratulations, Councillor Hopkins. So move on to apologies for absence.
Councillors Darlington and McLean, but they're both attending online.
Thank you. Move to minutes of the last meeting. Are there any questions as to accuracy? We're happy to approve them. Okay, take that as a yes, so we'll approve those minutes. Okay, moving on to item number 5, matters arising from the previous meeting. So we have EX43, the gender gap pay gap report. And the action there was for the ethnicity pay gap to be reported annually in future, which it will be. Actions on the head of human resources. EX44 performance management, Q3 2022-23. The environment and emissions targets would be added for 23-24. Direction of Finance and Assets, and I think we've got the we have got the climate and action plan later in the coming.
Yeah, so the emissions targets in the climate action plan. There is a recycling target as well, which we've investigated and we're struggling with, because we can say how many waste collections there were, recycling, not recycling, but not necessarily how much was in each one. So I need to have a little bit more thought about how we can get some sort of indicator around that. Great,
thank you. And I think we also had an action. Performance figures would be updated and reviewed, and any updates requested by members would be considered for inclusion in future reports, which is an ongoing action. EX45, exploring our culture. The status line in Appendix 1 had been changed to blue for blue for complete, green on track, amber is slightly off track, and red not progressing, which has been done, I think. Great, thank you. And the code of conduct and people strategy process to be looked at to see if they could be made into an e-learning package.
Yeah, so we weren't going to do them separate e-learning packages. We were going to look at it as part of a wider comms plan.
Right.
So whether we do it as part of a Speak Up campaign or something slightly different, but there is work on them.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. That's all the matters arising. Moves on to item number 6, disclosure of interests. Do members have any pecuniary interests they want to disclose? So no, thank you very much. Item number 7, are there any questions in accordance with Standing Order SOA7?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. Moves on to item number 8, budget monitoring report, April 2022 to March 2023, provisional outturn. Councillor Walsh, you can introduce it.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, the main detail is covered in the papers, but obviously the significant underspend is predominantly over £500,000 due to the reversal. So apart from that, it pretty much brings it online in budget. So thank you to all the officers for their hard work and diligence during this. Any questions, I'm sure Mark or Asif will happily answer.
Great. Handing over to Asif.
Perfect, thank you. I've got a bit of a summary just to provide a bit more information and have to take any questions. Good morning, members. The report in Appendix A sets out the authority's revenue and capital spend position as at 31st of March 2023, together with the projected outcome position for the financial year. Provisional outturn, as Matthew alluded to, is an underspend of 607k, and we're recommending that this is transferred to a revenue contribution to capital reserve. However, I must highlight here that even though I am reporting an underspend, there are 3 main factors which have influenced this. Firstly, it must be noted that this underspend includes a year-end technical adjustment and a reversal of a provision of £524,000 This predominantly relates to funds held in provision relating to holiday pay and potential compensation due to individuals impacted by the 2015 pension remedy, which was found to be age discriminatory. The government has directed that they will be covering these costs for the compensation, and so we reversed this provision out. Secondly, we also received a one-off funding in the region of 650k in January 2023 in relation to the 2021-2022 reconciliation of the business rates grants. This is a significant amount we have received and predominantly relates to the support provided to businesses in relation to COVID grants. Thirdly, I want to kind of highlight a positive in terms of how we've overachieved in terms of our treasury investment income. We've overachieved in the region of 300k. And just to kind of give a bit of a comparison, February 2022, when we set the budget, the base rate was 0.5%, and it currently stands at 5%. So we've kind of benefited for the significant increases in the interest rates. Now, these three factors that I've highlighted, if none of these had materialized, and I must stress as well, we did not know of any of these factors when we set the budget in February 2022, we would be comfortably sitting with a report presenting an overspend of 900k. And these were factors out of our control. So I just wanted to emphasize that even though it's an underspend, there's actually points there where we've overachieved and points there where we've received additional funding that we weren't aware of, or where the government's taken a slightly different direction, and again, we've benefited from it. So 2022-2023 has been a challenging year with a number of financial pressures being faced by the authority. We had the unknown around utility costs, inflationary pressures, and the higher than budgeted pay awards. All these pressures have been reflected in our outturn and future non-pay awards and have been reflected in our MTFP. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members? That's a question.
Guess I'm more thinking ahead now to the budgeting process for next year. It's sounding like it's going to be quite challenging with those underlying factors. Are we like to be in a position where we can push the precept, as we have done for something like a flat £5, rather than be capped at 1.99? I know it's the early part of the conversation, but I think I thank you for kind of flagging the underlying factors now. I certainly think that's going to need some thought as we approach the budget season.
I can initially start on it. In terms of the precept at present, we factored in 2.99% because it increased.
Yeah.
However, there are discussions within the fire sector that there might be potential to increase to £5 again at a flat rate across. I'll let Mark come in, who chairs the Fire Finance Network, who might provide a bit more detail around that.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, we managed to secure the additional £5 precept flexibility for the lower quartile in recognition of the significant pressures faced by that group of services. Last year, we managed to extend the principle to all fire services. That was based on some national work that we did around inflation, inflationary pressures. We had some really good data from all the services around what pressures they're facing, both in terms of pay, non-pay, especially around energy, etc. And that gave the evidence base for us to be awarded the additional flexibility. We're going to seek to kind of maintain that principle of flexibility. Doesn't mean that every service will go up to £5, but have the flexibility to go up to £5. I think would be beneficial for all. We're rerunning the inflationary survey at present, so we'll be informed by that and what that says. That closed last week, so the analysis has been done on our behalf. So based on what that says, we are going to seek to maintain that principle that we've got around flexibility. As you say, there's myriad of pressures coming up, lots of kind of changes in the external environment. So to have the flexibility to be able to respond to those, I think would be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Good morning, all from Surrey, Norfolk. Question on page 24, the property portfolio. The last paragraph talks about the desire to try and get some payback from the professional design team. Do we have an estimate of what we're trying to recover from that team, please?
Yeah, I can't give figures at the moment, and I wouldn't want to talk about a legal position in an open session either. So perhaps I can update members outside on that matter, if that's okay.
Fine, fully understood.
Okay, any other questions from members before I? So just a couple from from me. So I don't know if I don't know if I misunderstood, but on page 20, thank you for the update on the in-year growth bids. And I'd ask that we regularly get, not from member decision, but we get visibility to what the in-year growth bids are. But could you just explain the numbers on the marketing and communications licensing? Because I'm not sure I could quite work out the variance and what the variance was in relation to. And what is it that we've not done and where are we with that? Because that was quite a significant part of the spend.
Yeah, in terms of that, I haven't got anyone here from marketing. I'll come back to you in terms of that. So we've already spent 8,000. I think at present we've just purchased some marketing stuff. We've still got to get some licensing, so that's why there's a roll forward of 40k. We've already spent 8k of the budget that was allocated last year, and we're going to spend the residual amount this year.
So what's the variance to? Is it 6,000?
Oh, so they don't need the 55k that they needed. So the 55k is what they originally asked for. They've already spent 8,400 last year, and they're only going to carry forward 40,000. So in essence, they've already spent 48,000, and that's why there's a 6k underspent.
Oh, okay, right, fine. So right, okay, got you. That makes sense now. Thank you. And then just my usual question, just an update on page 21 on where we are now on the whole time establishment.
Yeah, so at the minute, as of the 7th of July, whole time was 292, on-call was 63, and support was 124. So at the minute, we have an advert that's out for on-call to whole time for firefighter crew and watch, because the last campaign that we had for transferees, we didn't have any applicants, so we're just looking at lots of different things to make sure that we can meet the target.
That was the junior officer transfer,
Yes, that's right.
not the transferee overall, right? Okay, and so just I'm sure at the last update we were referring to being at and above 300, that the target establishment by September. Where do we currently envisage that will take us?
Yeah, so at the minute, so there was supposed to be 12 that were coming in, so we should be kind of like the 300. So basically we're trying to look at all the different areas. We've got 18 who are starting on the 27th of September. We've got 11 people in the pool at the minute. There are basically the people that are due to start in September, and we're still going through tests, so medicals and DBSs and all of those kind of things. So we'll definitely get the 18 starting in September, and then we're going to be looking at when those other people in the pool, when they could start.
Right, okay, thank you. And then just on, I know we're going to get onto this when we do the property portfolio strategy as well, but just on page 24, two questions. So we refer to the West Ashland build as complete, but it's not complete, is it? Because we've got a top floor that isn't yet complete, and I'm just interested in what provision is there for completion of that top floor. And we ought to come back to that from a revenue perspective as well. And then I think it would just be helpful, and it might not necessarily be for papers, but I think I'd find it helpful to get a more regular update on the BAU works that are being done in stations, because certainly I know it's the case when I'm there, and I'm sure it's true for other members, when we're in stations, it's often the thing that is picked up, which is, you know, whether it's the kitchen, whether it's bits of the station that need to be done. It'd just be helpful to get more visibility to the BAU property spend, particularly where we now have this overspend for the year. How could we be using that to accelerate some of the BAU property improvement?
Yeah. So in terms of your initial question around West Ashland, there is a provision set aside for the second floor, and I'll let Mark come in, but in terms of our initial understanding with the second floor, when we first built it, was someone external would come in and they'd assist with the contribution of paying towards that. So at present, there isn't necessarily a provision set aside for it. And the second point about property, we can provide some more detail in terms of each station, the piece of work that's been done. Obviously, we try and summarise it as best as we can within this report, but there's no harm outside this report to be able to provide appendices or write something to members separately detailing the work that's been done. So I'll take that on board and feedback on that at a later date.
Okay. Yes, just to add to the point on the business as usual, we get regular updates to Business Transformation Board, which go down into the detail. We try and summarise it for members, but absolutely we can bring that detail to members if that's something they'd like to see and find helpful. especially in the context you say around making better use of some of the underspends.
Yeah.
In terms of the top floor, when it was first envisaged, COVID wasn't even a thing. We thought, as I've said, that'd be great. Letting out to an external company, Milton Keynes office space demand was through the roof. Obviously, we had the pandemic. People changed the way they worked massively. The latest advice we've had from Lambert Smith Hampton is we would really struggle now to let that as commercial office space. The only people that might take it up might be kind of a startup company. And then you've got all the issues of potential financial resilience, etc., like that, not knowing kind of who you're making those arrangements with. So it's probably more likely we're going to look at that strategically as we start looking at our estates, we start looking at coming out of this building. How can we perhaps make better use of that for ourselves or for partner agencies rather than doing a commercial let now, I think.
So when could we expect a sort of an update or proposal from officers on that? Because it's obviously been vacant now as a floor for quite some time. When can we expect to?
I think that will probably be a longer term thing as part of the CRMP and kind of what our overall estate requirement is. And as you say, we've got the property strategy today. That's more of an interim update to align us with the current public safety plan. It's going to be as part of the next CRMP process where we can start having a look at those kind of bigger scale things, I think.
Okay. So could we? So I'm just trying to reconcile in my head why we're linking it. I understand the broader estate point on the CRMP, but it's not. I thought it's an office space rather than an operational space, isn't it, that we're talking about? So could you just when do you think we could get a proposal on what timeline should we put as an action?
In theory, it can be whatever space we want it to be. At the moment, it's just a shell and has kind of very little fit out. So it could easily be changed to accommodate anything that a building of that nature could accommodate. So the most easy thing to convert to would be offices, but it can serve other purposes as well. We can bring something sooner if you'd like around proposals, perhaps linking with, there's a plan to do a kind of final outturn report that we like to have this Q3 of this year. So perhaps have a look at it as part of that, if that would be.
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Eligible.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be good. Catch that as an action. That'd be good. Thank you. Councillor Darlington.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I do think I think what the officers are proposing is absolutely the right thing. As we talk about moving out of the current building, whether or not that space then becomes a good strategic space for some of the uses of the current building. So I think it's all been said already, so it's fine.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? No. Okay, in which case, we're being asked to run through each of the recommendations because there's 5 of them. So being asked that the provisional outturn forecast for the authority as at 31st of March 2023 be noted, that the slippage of 1.1 million on the capital programme is approved to be carried forward into 23-24, that the underspend of 0.607 million is transferred into a revenue contribution to capital reserve, the delegated authority be given to the Chief Finance Officer to authorise any late changes to the movements in reserves and capital slippage amounts resulting from accounting adjustments needing to be made during the year-end close-down process, and that should any changes to the amounts referred to above be required, then the Chief Finance Officer will report these to members at the next available meeting. Are we happy to approve those recommendations?
Really?
Thank you very much. Moves us on to item number 9, which is the mobile communications programme, which I think you're introducing, Councillor Walsh.
Yes, Chairman, literally introducing, and then I will hand over the news please.
Okay, Marie, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the last paper presented to the Executive Committee regarding the Emergency Services Mobile Communications Programme was back in July 2022. Since then, a key delivery partner, Motorola, has left the programme, which has resulted in a relotting process. This has meant a pause in the delivery and deployment activities whilst the work to relot and revise the national business case again takes place. This paper outlines how the South Central region is going to manage this period to enable us to remain engaged and updated. So the region will maintain a strategic owner for ESMCP. This remains Deputy Chief Fire Officer Joe Bocock of Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue Service, and a single point of contact, the Thames Valley ESMCP Project Manager, Paul Channing. Fortnightly meetings are in place with the SPOC and service project managers to ensure that any issues that arise during this period are dealt with, and this releases local resources to deal with other service priorities.
It's unlikely there will be any further update papers submitted during this period until we receive notification that delivery work has restarted nationally, and this is not expected until mid-2025 at the earliest. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Councillor Hopkins.
Well, before I comment anything else, because this has been this is run as long as the Archers. So it's shambolic. It's not your fault. It is absolutely shambles. And why government get involved in IT projects, I don't know. I mean, if National Programme for IT in the health sector comes to mind, but also many others. And I used to work many years ago for Cable and Wireless. It had many of the framework contracts in government, and none of them were ever delivered to time or to budget. I think the obvious question is, from an operational perspective, there must have been, back in the midst of time, a business case, a business programme, project case, that actually said this programme is essential for the future operation of the fire and rescue services across the UK. And we're now so many years into it. Are we, as a local fire and rescue service, impacted negatively by this? Are our people put at danger? Is our ability to deal with the day-to-day operations that we have to get involved in some ways adversely affected by this? Or to be blunt, does it, because we've made other arrangements, is this almost now irrelevant?
I would like to say no, the impact is going to be minimal for us, particularly in the Thames Valley region. Airwave were originally meant to switch off their service at the end of 2019. When it looked as if ESMCP would be extending, they undertook to upgrade all of their base stations across the national network. And we're currently looking at a programme this is national, not just Buckinghamshire, to upgrade devices. So that it will happen either the end of this year or beginning of next year with officer devices, and then following that we'll be upgrading appliance devices, but that is a national element, and that will be at their cost, not our cost. There will be a minimal cost to get peripherals like carry cases and headsets, that kind of thing, but the actual devices will be funded by the government. In terms of, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. In terms of safety to our firefighters and to the public, within the Thames Valley region, when we moved to the fire control project and the combined control, we moved a step forward in comparison with other regions, in that we made arrangements to use Airwave for transferring data messages. A lot of services don't do that still, so they will be impacted by the delays. Whereas we've already made arrangements, we already do our data messaging via Airwave, and we've got contingencies around that. So we've been quite forward thinking as a region around that. So we feel quite comfortable that we will just maintain that watching brief. And we've always challenged and been reticent to move ahead with the things that the national project wanted us to do, because we've always had our eye on what if it doesn't happen again. So we've always been quite aware of that and made other arrangements. So as a region, we're quite comfortable that any extensionists, we can manage that.
Well, congratulations on your what if scenario planning. I'm reassured. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Christensen.
Just flipping that question slightly on its head then, in terms of, glad that we've made alternative arrangements, but what is the cost in terms of money and time, in terms of our involvement with this department? Is it costing us money? Is it costing us time? Or is it just something that's going on that we can largely?
So to date, or up until April this year, we had funding.
Yeah.
So we had funding to provide resource. At the end of March, beginning of April, that funding was withdrawn, which is why we've taken the decision to step back from the programme. There are requests still coming in for work, and we are looking at those requests and saying, are they vital? Is it essential? Or is it stuff that we've already done and told them about, and we're not going to do it again? So we're kind of looking at each request and saying, no, you're not paying us to do this work, so we're not going to do it.
I fully support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members? No, from the chair, happy to note the report.
Yes, mate. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Moves us on to item number 10, Environment and Climate Action Plan updates. Councillor Hopkins to introduce.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. An apology to the committee to some extent, because we moved forward with the the action plan in December in 2021, which is 18 months ago. But events, dear boy, events, as they said many years ago, have happened since. So there has been a little bit of a delay in bringing this forward, but it's all the better and all the more impressive as a document for the slight delay and consideration. It's hard to believe that it's 12 months or bar a month or so since the climate extremes we experienced in Milton Keynes and the rest of Buckinghamshire, and how much we have learned from that, and that learning has been incorporated into this paper. And of course, there is a relationship, of course, with the fleet and property strategy, which we're considering later on. But I'll pass across to Mark, who's going to actually introduce this paper. And I do have a couple of questions, and then when Mark is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. As Councillor Hopkins said, this action plan was originally approved by the Borough Authority in December 21, and this is the first update to appraise members of progress since then. So just a reminder, the original plan was split into two sections, adaptation and mitigation. So adaptation is about optimising our response to extreme weather events. And as Councillor Hopkins said, that plan was really well tested last year. There have been two recent updates provided to members on summer pressures, the most recent of which was at last month's Borough Authority meeting. So this paper acknowledges those updates, but the primary focus of this one is on the mitigation. And mitigation is the action we're taking to reduce our own impact on the environment. There's a summary table of actions on pages 40 and 41 of your packs, and detail on each action is on subsequent pages. The good news is that all previous actions are green or complete. There are two new actions. The first one is around Unit 7, so vacating this current building, which will obviously have environmental benefits. This action is already in the property strategy and the financial strategy, both of which are later on this agenda, so it's added here for completeness. The other action is to do a fully revised property strategy linked to the new CRMP. So as I said earlier, the later item on the agenda is an interim update aligned with the current plan. We will do a full revision of the property strategy and all the environmental impact associations with that when we do the CRMP for 2025 to 2030. There's lots of good news in here. The one thing I would just highlight, and this links to the action from the previous meeting the Chairman mentioned earlier, was to baseline our own carbon emissions, which have been calculated at 978 tonnes. On its own, that figure doesn't tell us a lot, but it's a good baseline to allow us to quantify future improvement that many of the actions will hopefully have on this figure. The other good news is it also shows us the benefit of signing up to the zero carbon electricity contract, which we have for this year, which has reduced our projected emissions to 23-24 by 283 tonnes, which is a significant reduction on the 978 tonnes for last year. I think that's probably a good point for me to stop and take any questions members may have.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'm of course pleased to see, Mark, the benefits of the zero carbon electricity contract in this paper. The contract was of course the lowest on offer at the time. I wonder if you could provide an update on the movement in energy prices since the contract was awarded, and how you will decide how to award future contracts should a zero carbon contract not be the lowest cost option in the future.
Okay, so in terms of energy costs, we keep a very keen eye on these. As members will be aware, our current contract was 1 year only due to the extreme volatility in prices experienced last year. The good news is that they had started to trend down from February, so we revised our estimates just before we set the budget, and they have gradually started to continue that downward trend since, at a much slower rate than before. So they're heading in the right direction at the moment as far as we're concerned. It's something we'll keep an eye on with a view to doing a forward deal and fixing for either 1, 2 or possibly 3 years going forwards, depending on what the market's telling us. In terms of the zero carbon, it's a slightly harder question to answer. So obviously we've got our financial best value responsibility as an authority. We also have an environmental responsibility. I think given our electricity contract is around about £500,000, I'd probably be looking in the region of perhaps willing to pay perhaps 1 or 2% more on that for a zero carbon one if it was slightly more expensive. But obviously I'll take that decision in consultation with yourself as lead for environment and Councillor Walsh as lead member for finance.
Yeah, thank you for that. And if I could, with the second question, Chairman, I'm pleased to note the Fire Authority is revisiting the possibility of solar panels at the fire station in Marlow. However, it has been pointed out to me that there was a story in a local website recently regarding alleged wildlife destruction at the station. Can you explain more about what happened and what you were doing by way of a response, please? You brute.
Yes, certainly, councillor. So to cut a long story short, there was a proposed road scheme at Marlow, and this started pre-COVID, I think, where they're going to use some of our land at the top end to expand the roadway to improve roundabout access, etc., slip roads. To and fro on that scheme. So whilst that scheme was still on the table, we didn't bother maintaining the land. It was going to have diggers driven right across it, be dug up, etc. So it kind of was slightly overgrown, as it were. The road scheme eventually didn't proceed. So as part of the contract, the deal was they restated to the land to the condition it was when we found it, i.e. lay it back to lawn. There's a group in Marlow called Wild Marlow who are very keen on allowing kind of grass to grow, to allow pollinators to breed, etc. They observed that this had happened, and a story appeared in the Bucks-Free Press about the destruction of this habitat, which is valuable to local wildlife. So I contacted the lady who works for Wild Marlow, a lady called Verity, and had a meeting on station. She said, "What do you want to get out of this meeting?" To which I said, "We've made a mistake. We've done something which we hadn't considered the implications of. Help us learn to be better at doing this kind of thing," to which she was only too pleased to assist. So she's drawn a bit of a plan of how we can reinstate some of this natural habitat that had grown, we've now lost, how we can rectify that. So we've got some plans in place, which are going to be very low cost. It will also reduce the amount of maintenance, grounds maintenance we have to do on site. So it's a win-win from that point of view. They're willing to supply volunteers, to supply some of the seeds. So it's a real partnership working. And if it's successful, it's something we can look to replicate at other stations. So it was a bad news story, but something I think good has come out of it.
I think there's some learning there, Chairman, as well about how we can work with local environmental groups across the county, and including Milton Keynes, moving forward and learn from their expertise on our estate in particular. Thank you,
That's a
Chairman.
very good point. Very good point. Councillor Christensen.
Thank you. Would it be possible to benchmark our CO2 footprint against our peers, just to it'll help inform the scale of our ambition in terms of, well, are we already in the best quarter in the upper quartile or lower quartile?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I'd like to do. I did have a quick look when I calculated our figure to see what was already out there publicly. I only managed to find one or two, and it's hard to tell to the authorities of different sizes. They're going to have different footprints. They need to adjust for that, but that's absolutely something I'd like to do. This is very much a starting point.
Yeah.
There's lots more still to do, and that would help inform us. Yeah, are we an outlier? Are we good? Are we bad? Are we indifferent? So yeah, very much something that's on the radar to put in progress.
Thank you.
Is it, so on that point, is it not something the NFCC tracked? It's not something they've got?
There is a group, but I don't know how many authorities have already calculated their starting point and how widespread it is. So that's something I need to look into.
Okay. Any other comments from members? So I've got two things. One is just wanted to add my I don't know, congratulations, but I was impressed by the work that's been done on the electricity contract and the impact that's going to have, and I'd encourage us to make sure we're promoting that from this meeting to the wider public. I think it's an important message about what we're doing. I'm going to just ask a question on Unit 7, which refers to a business case setting out the options for exiting the building. We'll present it to the Executive Committee for approval during Q3. Recognise that we've now put in place the ability to terminate the lease, giving 9 months' notice, and I know that officers will need to plan what that exit will look like. It was an explicit element of the 2022-23 budget, to get my years right, as one of the efficiencies. And so therefore, what I would ask is that isn't Q3 23-24. I'd like that to come to the next Executive Committee, please, which I think is it September or October? September. So it would just be a bit more precise and have that proposal on Unit 7 for that September Executive, please. Good. We're being asked to.
If I just, sorry, Chairman, I think you make a very good point about there's a very good news story here that we actually direct this. You know, they're being produced a comms piece that goes out to the media saying what we've done and how we should do that, how we can promote that.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, but just a tiny element of caution there. It is only a 12-month deal, and 1 or 2% pricing difference is okay, but you know,
I think there are, I don't have a debate with the chairman's review. I think there are other elements within the paper. I wasn't just thinking about that element, but I think that is part of it.
Yeah, I'll pick up with Anne-Marie and the comms team of
Yeah.
how can we highlight. There's lots of
Perhaps
good
you could
news
run
in
that
here.
past the chairman and myself before you release it.
Yes, yes, certainly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Any other comments? Happy to make the report. Thank you. Moves us on to item number 11, which is the financial strategy update. Councillor Walsh.
thanks, Matthew. Good. Thank you, Chairman. This report is obviously Mark and Asif will take you through the detail, but I think it is very forward facing in terms of how our financial position has improved as an authority, but it is no opportunity to take our foot off the accelerator in terms of budget review process. I'm going to be discussing with the Director of Finance and Assets how we begin this year's budgeting process when we'll get back from some holidays to ensure that we continue to drive as many efficiencies as possible. But I'll leave Mark and Asif to take you through the detail, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Walsh. So the original strategy was approved in November 2020, and this is the second update to members on progress since then. As Councillor Walsh says, the financial position has improved significantly since our last update. And this is primarily due to additional flexibility on council tax, which was touched on in previous item. The threshold before, where it's limited to either 2 or 3%, has a significant detrimental impact on us as one of the lowest Band D services in the country. So that flexibility has really helped put us in a much stronger financial position. As Councillor Walsh said, that doesn't mean we're pushing any less hard on efficiency. We'll continue to challenge costs, spend, potential income streams, etc. The good news, HMIC FRS data shows that cost per firefighter for Bucks is just over £20 compared to the national average of just over £25. And our own KPI data shows that our total net expenditure is also significantly below the national average. So we do kind of push hard on efficiency, and we are a very efficient service in terms of what we deliver for the money we have. Page 60 of the packs shows our debt position, steps taken to prove that even further. So as well as our kind of revenue position, our balance sheet position is also improving in terms of debt. We have repaid one of our loans early. As I've mentioned earlier, the change in interest rates over the past year, which meant that rather than paying a premium to repay early, we actually moved into getting a discount position. So they paid us money to pay them back. It's quite good. So we continue to keep other loans under review. There's a long-term loan for about £2 million at the moment. We're just trying to look at the optimum point to pay that back if indeed we do that. If we were to pay that loan back early, we'd be debt-free within the next 10 years based on current maturity profile. So that's a really strong position to be in. The previous actions were in the original strategy, and there's an action update plan on pages 67 to 68 of your packs. The majority of the actions are either green or complete. A lot of the actions in 2022-23 to be carried forward into this year. There was a fallow year in the original strategy to allow for a bit of flex in the plan, which I think was wise, and will continue to progress those actions. As the chairman just said, Unit 7 business plan is noted in the paper to come to Q3 as requested. This will now come to the September meeting. Also, given our improved financial position, we've taken the opportunity to update our reserve strategy, which on pages 69 to 73 of your packs. So the proposal is to rename some reserves to more accurately describe their purpose. So, for example, the apprenticeship reserve is now going to be the workforce planning reserve, and that will help us where we look to get over 300 or we dip below 300 to smooth out the ups and downs on that one. Plus reallocating some reserves no longer required for their original purpose. Predominantly, we had a future funding reserve, which was held originally to shield us from future funding cuts or budget deficits. Now the position has improved, we can repurpose that, and taking some of the reserves no longer required, we'll be in a position to have circa £3 million available to invest in transforming the service in line with the upcoming CRMP. The detailed recommendations around reserves and noting the report on page 47 of your packs, but more than happy to answer any questions members may have first.
Thank you very much. Questions from members? No. Okay, in which case I'll ask mine. So firstly, thank you for the report. It was really really well laid out and some fantastic data, and I think overall shows a sorry, I've got him here. Shows some really good underlying improvement in the financial position of the authority. So well done to you and the team. Just on preset flexibility point on that first. So I think my position on it is that we absolutely want the benefit of preset flexibility. And I think as an authority, we'll continue to push for that flexibility to be ongoing. That is different to exercising that flexibility when it comes to the decision, because the pressure on council taxpayers, as we all know, has been significant over the last 12 months with lots of authorities and services increasing their precepts and council tax. And therefore, I think it is important that we, as well as seeking that flexibility, continue to drive on efficiencies. And I think one of the things that's quite striking when you go through the report is that we have done a lot on efficiencies, and your point's well made, Mark, that we're an efficient service, and therefore the next phase of seeking efficiencies is going to be much harder for the service, understandably. And so therefore I think it's worth us just considering whether we seek some external support for the next phase of the budget process to just challenge some of our collective thinking, both as members and as officers, around where efficiencies might sit, where other opportunities for collaboration might be, because obviously our frame of reference does tend to get quite narrowed by our own experiences. So just something for officers just to reflect on. The specific thing that I've made the point before, but actually before I get to that, so just on the governance section, where it refers to the financial expertise of the governing body, and we've just done a sit for self-assessment in another context, and it's really helpful. Maybe I've missed it, but when was that sit for self-assessment done? Because actually, I think it would be helpful when we last did it, members did a self-assessment as well on sit for code, and I think it would be helpful to do that. We've had quite sort of change in members, just to see if there are things that we should be picking up from our own development and expertise perspective. And then final bit, which is just on reserves, on page 21. So I think I asked you this question in a previous meeting, this chart includes the underspend, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what I think this demonstrates is that our reserves are now in a really strong position.
Good.
Notwithstanding that we've got some of the risks that we know, I think it's now incumbent upon us to be really clear about how we're using those reserves for transformation of the service. And I think as we go through Q3, it'd be really good to start getting into much more detail about how we're going to turn those reserves into transformational activities for the service to us. So there's both comments and questions there. I'll hand over to you.
Okay, yeah, I'll take those as they came. There's quite a lot there. If I missed anything, please come back to me. Firstly, thank you for noting the good work of the team. There's a section on there in the team, and it's a really strong finance team that's helped to deliver this, so all credit to those for their hard work. In terms of precept flexibility, yeah, absolutely agree with your point. It's called flexibility. It's not the maximum you should aim for. We should only be asking for what we need. Last year, we absolutely needed it, and I went on record as saying if we didn't take it, we'd have been in a really bad financial position. So obviously, we'll keep that under review for this year. As Councillor Walsh said, we've got a budget setting challenge process to go through. We'll absolutely challenge the expenditure on that to make sure we're spending what we need to spend and investing where we need to invest, and we'll set the budget according to that. In terms of efficiencies and getting some external support or potentially challenge, I'll have a look into that and see how we can perhaps incorporate that into our challenge process, whether it's an external expert from another service potentially sitting on one of those panels. We can investigate that certainly. In terms of governance, the self-assessment was more a self-assessment of the service rather than skills. That was in the original financial strategy, which I think probably predates your time on the authority, Chairman. So we did an assessment against the SIT for Financial Management Code back in 2020, I think it was. We can ask members to do a bit of a self-assessment of their own skills if you think that would be beneficial. So I can have a look into that. And in terms of reserves, yeah, absolutely agree with your point. This is, again, the starting point to set the baseline of what we've got. And we'll absolutely bring forward plans of, okay, we know how much we've got now. As you say, the financial outlook is so much more stable than it was in the past. When HMIC visitors before, they said our reserves were unsustainable, and based on future forecasts, they were. Whereas now, taking the decision we have taken on the precept, You can see they're sustainable. You refer to page 21. So some of the dotted lines near the bottom of that around the net budget requirement. So if you've got above 15% net budget requirement, I'm generally happy. 10%, I'd start getting very nervous. 5%, you'd see me panicking. Just out of interest, and this isn't a target, but just where we are compared to other services, the median net budget requirement held in reserves by fire services when we did the last survey was 43%. So there are some services sitting on big amounts of reserves. We're not in that position, but we are in a position where we do have a decent amount, as I said, circa £3 million to invest in transformation, and we'll bring those plans forward in due course.
Great, thank you. I've got Councillor Lambert first.
Thank you. I just have the benefit of being on this authority for 10 years now, and having gone and argued God knows how many times for flexibility around the precept and the £5 for fire and all of that meant, as well as all of the efficiency savings and all the work we need to do to bring us up to the cohort of staff that we need for our IRMPs, as well as our building dilapidation strategies and all that transformation stuff. And I'm deeply worried that we would consider, using the word flexibility and other efficiencies as the way to bring this service up to the funding that it actually requires from the public purse. So I think I'm very concerned, Chairman, of what you were saying about the flexibility, and that, I get it, it's flexibility, it's there should we need to take it. But I don't think we've been here for 10 years, we are not out of the woods yet. So we need to be mindful that efficiencies only get us so far, but we actually do need that cash and investment. And service area, its population is growing, and the complexity of what we serve is growing. So I'm very concerned that we just end up being boxed into saying, and we won't take it because we've taken £1 million here or 50,000 there. I'd rather we had that conversation when it comes to the budget setting process, than right now setting the principle that we're not going to take it.
So I'm not quite sure why we're having a disagreement over it, but just so we're clear, what I think I said, and I'm happy to watch the YouTube and make sure I said what I think I said that having flexibility, which I think we absolutely do need so we can properly manage the finances of the service, is different to using the flexibility. And I stand by that comment, because I'm not going to sit here now and say we're going to get flexibility and we're going to use that flexibility to increase the income to the service, because we haven't yet looked at what the transformation requirements, the transformation plan flowing from the reserves is. We don't yet know what the financial position of the service is when we get to make that decision. And I'm saying that I'm not somebody that starts with an assumption that we're going to put up the precept. That's my personal view, and I will hold to that view. If the precept is required for financial sustainability of the service, I think it demonstrated in last year's budget process, I will absolutely support putting up the precept. But I think it would be wrong for us to sit here and say we're going to continue to put up the precept. So I don't think any of us are disagreeing that we don't have the data or information in front of us today to make that decision. So I'm sorry that you're concerned by it, but I think that's a very sensible position for me to hold. So anything you want to add to that? Or?
I remain concerned. This report says all the prices are going up, and our energy costs and the cost of water, even one thing we need to put out fires. Kind of a worry that we're in that position. And I think making that statement right now at this time, I think is preempting and could set off heads in different directions that is not helpful to the service. Okay. But I do hear you. I do understand what you're saying. We are actually talking about the same thing, but slightly differently in its approach.
Yeah, I'm certainly saying I'm not neither supporting putting up the precept nor not putting up the precept, but I'm saying that we should push for the flexibility, which is sensible for our ability to manage the finances of the service. And I've been somebody that pushed for it with ministers over the last period, and I'll push for it again. But I'm also saying that it's our responsibility to make sure that we've exhausted all of the efficiencies that we can drive out from the service, and to look at all of the sources of income that we can get to make sure that we minimise the impact on council taxpayers wherever we can. And that's my personal position and the one that I'll hold to. So I've got McLean, thank you. My eyesight let me down.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 4 points. First one's on page 61 of the pack, and it relates to the organisational structure in terms of the payroll. I just like Mark or ask you to comment that, to me, there seems to be a potential risk that if we don't have the payroll manager and the payroll assistants, working because they're on part-time contracts and it's a critical time of the month, and I'm sure that they're not going to take holiday, but they could actually go sick, whether there is enough cover there with that new structure. Second point is on page 62, and it picks up on something you've just said and Mark's responded to about the master classes. I'd be interested to know when they are going to be available, and they're mentioned several times. Page 63, the final paragraph about external, about the audit. Mark may not want to comment again, but when I see it says there are a number of reasons for this, but it doesn't create any significant concerns. Well, why is there no? Why is the delay? And the last point is on page 66. The only item that is in red in this on this section of the report is the one about efficiency and effectiveness. So what actions are in place to address those? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kate. Just on the last point, unless I've misunderstood that, because obviously that's the thing, so that refers to HMI CFRS's last inspection in 2021, where clearly we've made progress since, but I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, so I'll come on that point first. So yeah, that was based on their last report. As members will be aware, they've completed their inspection of the service recently, but we haven't had yet their report for this year. So we're very much hopeful that they will say they've noticed an improvement, especially around financial sustainability. But until we get that report, which is due, I'm going to say autumn. I know you hate me using the term, but it's going to be autumn this year. That's outside of our control, unfortunately. Until we get that report, it's too early to sign that one off as an improvement. So we think it's improved, but hopefully they'll recognise that improvement. Just to pick up a couple of other ones, then I'll let Asif come in on the payroll one, if that's okay. The issue around the audit has primarily been around valuations, and it's very technical, and I won't bore you with the detail, but there's lots of arguments how you value a fire station, because they're sold so infrequently. How do you get the market value? It's all about presentation of the balance sheet, which has no real impact on the accounts themselves, other than what numbers are in a couple of sections. It doesn't impact reserves or underspends or anything like that. We are looking nationally how we can make audits slicker as a user group. And one of the big recommendations is let's just simplify the valuation process, because it's not just us that have suffered anecdotally, there's lots of other services. And the primary issues are valuations around property, plant and equipment, and valuations around pensions, which cause a lot of excitement, but at the end of the day, don't make a huge amount of difference to your average user of the accounts. Then your reference to the masterclasses, I will circulate those to members, as well as looking at potential self-assessments. I'm going to say they're really useful, but I would do because I present them. So if you want to listen to me talk about accounts for 3 hours, bite-sized chunks, then you're very welcome to. Hopefully they'll be beneficial. So I'll circulate those, and I'm always happy to take any questions members may have on those as well. I'll let Asif talk about the payroll a little bit.
Thank you for that question, Councillor. In terms of payroll, we have been operating on this model for the last 12 months, but there is resilience outside the payroll team as well. So we have, because I manage the finance, payroll and pensions team, so I kind of get the work to be spread out if there are any shortages in staff. In an ideal world, I would want a payroll manager on a full-time basis. We did try and recruit someone on a full-time basis before this individual was promoted into this role, and we struggled. It's quite a niche area. So it was a risk of either not offering this person the flexibility and losing them, and then really struggling, because at that point we'd have had no one in payroll, because the 2 new people have already started in the last 12 to 18 months. However, to stop us from coming into this position again, we are putting processes in place and ensuring that there's some form of succession planning, and to ensure that actually we're not ever stuck in this position again. Ideally, when this individual leaves, I would prefer to have someone on a full-time basis. But at present, we're just working with this model and training the 2 individuals that sit beneath that manager to ensure we have a clear succession plan in place.
That's fine. Thank you very much for the answers.
Very much. Any other comments? Note, in which case can we firstly note the report and then approve following changes to usable reserves to be made retrospectively with effect from 31st of March 23, with the apprentice reserve being renamed to workforce planning reserve, with the future funding reserve being renamed to transformation reserve, but the continuing projects reserve be closed and the balance of 80k transferred to the transformation reserve, and the COVID-19 reserve be closed and the balance of 594k transferred to the transformation reserve. Happy to approve those.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moves us to item number 12, updated fleet and property strategies. Councillor Walsh.
Thanks, Chairman. These are just a few minor alterations and extensions of the strategies that are currently in place. Just one typo, unfortunately, Chairman, that I noticed this morning, which is on page 126 on the pack. 19.3 doesn't have any associated text. It's removed from the draft that we discussed previously. So I just think those numbers need to. Apart from that.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Okay, thank you both. As Council says, these are interim updates to both strategies to align them with the public safety plan, and both will be fully revised from 2025 onwards to align with the new community risk management plan. So I'll just briefly take each in turn. So the original fleet strategy was approved November 2017, and substantive updates to that are noted in the exec summary. There's an updated action plan on pages 94 to 96 of your packs. Again, all previous actions have been completed or are now part of business as usual. And there's one new action, and that's to pilot the use of smaller response vehicles in relation to the summer pressures that we discussed earlier and at previous authority meetings. And the first of those vehicles went on the run the other week, which is good news. In terms of the property strategy, this was originally approved in May 2018. And again, substantive updates are noted in executive summary. As we said earlier, the strong links to the Environment and Climate Action Plan, which was earlier on the agenda. Council pointed out a typographical issue on section 19.3 where we had consolidated some text, but it didn't remove the section heading. There is also one other typographical error, and I'm not sure how this occurred. It's either something to do with track changes on words or converting it to PDF. But section 17.4 somehow managed to get omitted in its entirety. So this was meant to detail actions relating to the Blue Light Hub that were raised during an internal audit. So there's a few bullet points to say that when we're doing projects that scale, that there must be a comprehensive risk register, including risk of poor performance from the contractor in place, adequate level of contingency budget for the project. Members will note in the appendix around the condition survey, we have now put contingencies in place for each of those, so we picked up that recommendation. A recommendation around formalising governance when there's multiple partners involved, for example, with the Blue Light Hub, with police and SCAS. And also to give consideration to any additional internal resource above the current establishment that may be required to support a project during its life cycle. So apologies that that's been missed off. That will be added to the final approved version. Just coming back to the strategy, there's an action plan on page 131. There's a bit of a mix on this of some that's complete, some that's still to do. So, for example, Unit 7 in High Wycombe, some that are ongoing, and some that have been removed from the plan following the initial feasibility study. So, in the initial strategy, there's something around looking at Buckingham. Very quickly, as we explored that, it wasn't feasible, so that's been dropped out. The most significant update is to reflect the last 5-year condition survey which we had completed last year, and that's basically our roadmap for all the property work we do over the next few years. And it's pleasing to note the continual improvement in work required at each survey. So in 2013, the value of work outstanding was 4.4 million. In 2017, it was 2.4 million. And in 2022, it reduced to 1.6 million. So that shows the value of the continued improvement the members have approved for our property estate and the value of that. I think that's a good point for me to stop and take any questions again.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members? Councillor Hall.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just on disposal of the red fleet, Mark, I noticed that we sold 3 Scanias at the auction, which I actually deal with in Doncaster last month. And I see they went for something like 36,000, give or take a few fees. I reckon they're worth about 66,000 for those 3. So could we investigate ways of disposal? I know we used to do it through EFA, didn't we? And then we did it through, I think we did sealed bids before that. I mean, we can control who we sell to, but we don't necessarily need to just put them through the auction and get the lowest price. I think that's scrap value. They are premium vehicles.
Yes, so in terms of disposal, we have tried various methods in the past. The issue with sealed bids is then there's a responsibility for us decommissioning, debattenberging, and it puts a lot of risk onto the authority, which is why we try to favour putting out to external auctions. as you say, EFA had lots of experience in dealing with that. Unfortunately, they've ceased trading, so we're looking at a few different methods. Sometimes it can just be who's there on the day. Auctions can be a little bit hit and miss. We assume that they've got no value in the budget, so anything we do get as a bonus, we will of course look, and I think we probably are going to try a few different auction places to see kind of who they attract, what expertise they've got in marketing them. So yeah, it's a bit of an exploration at the moment in terms of the best way of doing it. So obviously we'll keep members up to date on that one as well.
So I think just might be worth the team or whoever, just given Councillor Hall's sort of knowledge and expertise in the area, might be worth just having a conversation about ideas he might have on it as well.
Yeah, very good suggestion, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Any other comments, questions? In which case, can I just ask on page 76, the forecasted expenditure for property now includes 25,000 per annum for specific EDI improvements. So my question is, are we confident, given the baseline of the stations, that budget is sufficient?
Okay, so in terms of EDI, that 25K was set aside, it wasn't necessarily for, as I tried to explain in the last meeting, facilities in its totality. It was more around basic modification around the state. So if someone wanted a prayer room or quiet room, we could get some furniture in and fridge and so forth. Or if any queries were raised, for example, we had the HQ room that was HQ door that was automated. That's not enough to do it if we're going to look at a wide range of estates and look at facilities and look to refurb and so forth. So that's a separate piece of work that the property manager is looking at in terms of standardisation, to kind of look at the whole estates, see what we exactly need in each station, what's feasible, and carry out gap analysis, and then identify how we're going to kind of do that. Whilst that work is in the plan, we haven't built that into our property strategy yet. Once that piece of work's done, and we know what the financials look like, then there'll be a separate piece of work. So this 25K is predominantly just for basic kind of changes that come into an EDI, the network that people have requested.
Yeah, I think the other point I'd add to that, as it's absolutely right in what he says and the way that money is dealt with. Whenever we do any work on a station, we'll always consider ED&I implications. So, for example, we did some stuff at Wickham where last summer it got so hot we had to put air conditioning because it just wasn't kind of usable as a dorm for the crews, especially when it's on a main road, you can't open the windows. So as part of that, we took the opportunity to improve female dorm capacity of that. So whenever we do any work, we'll address ED&I implications. That is just an additional specific pot, as Isaac has said. And there's always more we can look to do. So you mentioned earlier around the underspend. We'll look to see if we can accelerate any improvements as part of that as well. So it's very much on our agenda, and where we can put more money into it, we will do.
Great, thank you. Councillor McLean.
Thank you very much. Page 29/108, we got section 4 fleet monitoring. I looked at the table or the two tables several times. They didn't seem to tally, because very roughly, if you divide the total miles by the total volume, 21/22 is quite anomalous compared to the others. The very high litres, but not necessarily the highest mileage. So I just would ask that those figures are checked, or is it because there's fuel in the tanks at the beginning of the year that it's low at the end of the year and so on. But just if you could have a look at that, and don't need to comment now because it's probably in detail, but just seems a bit anomalous. That's middle year.
So I will very briefly just touch on that. I did challenge those figures as well for the fleet manager at the time, because I did those calculations. Some of it might be, as you say, with just kind of cut overs end of years. Some of it's going to be not all the fuel is used for driving to and from incidents, so it's not always related to number of miles. It could be if you're running the pumps for a long time, that uses a lot of diesel as well. So it's not necessarily just about the miles covered, it's how they use that at incidents as well. Kind of speed, lots of frequent short journeys use more diesel than kind of infrequent longer journeys. So the data probably isn't 100% accurate, but it's probably as good as we're going to get out of our system. There will be some anomalies, but I think it's a good indication of where we're at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are being asked to approve the updated fleet and property strategies. We have to do so.
Chairman, may I just suggest, I think that the Chief Financial Officer maybe could amend his recommendation to something like that the updated fleet and property strategy to 2025 be approved, subject to the amendments raised in respect of section 17 and 19 of the property strategy.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Good, so we have to approve on that basis? Agreed, thank you very much. So that moves us to item number 13. To consider excluding the public and press representatives from the meeting by virtue of paragraph 1 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as the report contains information relating to any individual. Paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as the report contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of a person, including the authority. And on these grounds, it is considered the need to keep information exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing information. Are we happy to do so?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. So,